Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our panelists and to all of our participants. I'm the South County Task Force Deputy Chair or Vice Chair, depending on the moment. I'm Larissa Couts and a resident of Lee District. So this is a general meeting of the South County Task Force, which is open to the public. We are a 45-year-old citizens organization dedicated to supporting healthcare, housing, equity in the Richmond Highway area of Fairfax County. Among other things, we hold 4 to 5 general meetings a year on topics of special interest to the Richmond Highway community. This is one of several meetings that try to bring new ideas to bear on issues identified by Route 1 community members at meetings held last year. So other new ideas meetings that were already held this year was one on anti-racist policies and on equitable development. And those are available on the South County Task Force YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page, which I will, once I'm done talking, I can post those links in the chat, unless Matt beats me to it. So for housekeeping, we are recording this meeting and we'll make it available via, oh, hold on, I need to mute some folks. Actually, I'm gonna mute everybody. There we go. Can you guys still hear me? Wonderful. So I will ask the panelists and other speakers to just unmute yourselves when you're ready to talk. So we're recording this, we're sending out a link in our newsletter. Please put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and please make sure to keep yourselves on mute unless you're one of the panelists. So 2 items about tonight. We're going to have some participants will be speaking in Spanish, and then they will be translated into English. Because there's a lot of information and a short amount of time, we're not going to do the inverse and translate all the English into Spanish, but residents who are Spanish speakers will be able to view this presentation later with a translator. To facilitate translation, all presenters and questioners, please speak in plain, simple English and avoid jargon and acronyms to the extent possible, or at least speak the full name upon first use of an acronym. So it's my honor to present the infamous and indomitable Mary Payton, the chair of our task force, and I will hand it over to you, Mary.
Hi, thank you, Larissa. So I just want to say that our meeting of local residents last year identified displacement of low-income residents caused by development as a major issue along Route 1 community, formerly called Corridor, but we call it community because it's not just a place you drive through, it's a place where people live. Some of the communities most vulnerable to displacement are our mobile home communities. So we have about 1,000 mobile homes along Richmond Highway in Fairfax County, as well as a large-scale transit center development plan called Embark that is sparking interest among developers and raising land prices. Also, at the same time, we have a county task force that is making recommendations to the county on how to preserve affordable housing, including mobile home housing. We also have a modernization of our zoning code going on, and we have a specific request by the owners of 2 mobile home parks to develop them into very dense market rate residential use. So I'm talking 30 dwelling units per acre. So fortunately, this is all happening at a time when our main speaker, Jonathan Knopf, has brought together a statewide coalition around recognizing the importance of mobile homes as affordable housing. And he hosted a week-long conference on the topic with experts and practitioners from around the county. I actually listened to this whole conference. It was about 18 hours, maybe more. It was fascinating. I recommend it. The links are in all of our announcements to this meeting. And that coalition and conference have introduced some new ideas on how to appreciate mobile home communities as affordable housing and how to make them more secure and stable, safer and healthier, as well as what policies, partnerships, and financing can be used to make this happen. And since the South County Task Force follows the principle of nothing about us without us, we have invited residents of some of our mobile home parks to discuss life in their communities why they like living there, how they've invested in their homes, and what they would like to see in the future. So far, many officials talk about getting these people into real homes, but we need to listen to what the residents want and look at how we might help them make it possible. So as far as the structure of this meeting, Jonathan Knopf will give us an overview of some of the new thinking for about 15 minutes. And people from the mobile home parks will speak about their needs and visions. So those are our two main segments. Then we have an excellent panel, many of whom were involved with the mobile home conference. And they will introduce themselves and say a few words about their work, and we'll have a discussion based on some questions that our task force has raised about mobile home parks. Okay, so first we're going to hear from Jonathan. He's the director of the Mobile Home Communities Coalition of Virginia, a brand new group which organized a Zoom conference called Some Assembly Required, very good name, on how mobile home parks are becoming high quality, affordable housing. Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mary. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I hope that works for everybody. And I think we're there. Well, thank you, Mary. I really appreciate the kind comments about our group and the symposium we held last month. But to be sure, I was just one cog in the machine. It took many, many people to help that event turn into a success, including all of the panelists and moderators for the sessions we had, some of whom are with us tonight, which is really exciting, and I appreciate their continued interest in these topics and engaging with you folks up there in Fairfax, just an hour or so north on Route 1. So tonight, as Mary said, I will speak just briefly about what is happening with our coalition statewide, some of the themes that we are seeing across the state, and hopefully prime the conversation that you all will have for the remainder of tonight. So I'm very privileged and thankful to be able to speak to you all. So let's talk about mobile home parks. Let's talk about manufactured housing. And let's maybe talk about it in a different way than many of us have in the past. So when you ask somebody what comes to mind when you hear mobile home park, if you just pick a random person on the street, you are probably going to get some very stereotypical words and images out of folks' minds because of the media atmosphere that has surrounded these communities for decades now. And this is unfortunate. Sometimes you get people who think that parks are literally, in the case of this picture, on the other side of the tracks. And for folks who were able to listen in on some of the speakers at our symposium last month, you will have heard that these placements of many of these communities in less than desirable locations, sometimes on the other side of the railroad tracks, was intentional because this is a land use that many planners did not see as appropriate near other residential high opportunity areas. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But the reality, as many of you know, is that parks are very unique. There is no stereotypical mobile home park. Many of the parks across Virginia, and there are hundreds, if not close to 1,000, that's actually a problem we have. We don't know how many there are. But I've visited close to 100 in the state that I can remember. And most of them look something like this. They are pretty well-established communities of homes where people are invested in them and keep them up. In some cases, the parks that we find across Virginia are in very good condition and are in good enough shape to rival any classic residential stick-built subdivision they may be next to. And so there's a wide range of these parks throughout the state and throughout different localities and regions, especially here in Richmond, where our coalition is based. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of construction and design innovations happen, mostly in other parts of the country, but our coalition is invested in trying to bring some of these design innovations to Virginia to make them accessible and attainable and affordable to mobile home owners and people who may want to purchase one. And so I know Chris Nicely and others will talk about this later tonight. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just trying to spread the message. Another advancement is that we're seeing different types of ownership. We're seeing resident-owned communities across the country, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But at the end of the day, what this very diverse set of communities has left us with is that manufactured homes and mobile home parks are the largest source of unsubsidized, affordable housing in the country. Mobile home parks do not receive any form of government assistance. There are many, many more mobile homes, even in parks, than there are public housing units across the country and here in Virginia. So they are a source of what some call naturally occurring affordable housing, but it's not without the drawbacks that come with this model, where you do not own the land underneath. The housing units themselves are sometimes in worse condition than comparable stick-built homes. And so there's a trade-off, and managing this trade-off is the challenge that our coalition wants to try to overcome. So let's take a step back a little bit and go back to the 1950s, because I want to make sure we all have a common understanding of how the industry got to where we are today. So this is very simplified, but if you look back in the marketing books for the trailer home industry and the mobile home industry, but the 1950s and 60s and into the 70s were what we call the honeymoon years. The American public was very enamored with the idea of hooking a trailer up to their car and going up and down the East Coast and visiting beaches and visiting towns. And so this truly was the mobile trailer home. It wasn't really until the 1970s that we saw the industry mature and these types of homes become a more permanent housing solution, as people took their trailers that they bought and affixed them into a permanent location in an RV park that slowly turned into a mobile home park. But as we know, many of those homes were never moved again and still are not moved, rarely ever. So beginning in the 1970s, especially in 1976, the federal government stepped in and began to impose safety and quality standards for these mobile homes, and the industry began calling them by their technical term, which is now manufactured homes or manufactured housing. So following the government regulation of these homes, which made them safer and more energy efficient, but they were still very affordable, the industry began producing these at a very high number. And so you look at where the waves of production were in the early to mid 70s, again in the 80s, and again in the 90s. And these homes have been produced and deployed throughout many, many different parts of the country, but especially in the Southeast, in the Midwest, and clustered in mobile home communities in the Northeast, here in Virginia, and in the Northwest. So they are all over the country, and the industry is still producing these. But today, we're kind of left with the hangover from this honeymoon. The financing on these homes is often predatory because they are chattel loans. It's like buying a car or a jet ski. You cannot get a typical home loan on a manufactured home unit if you are going to place it in a park. And so this really limits the opportunities for mobile home owners to build wealth and equity in their home if they can't treat it like normal real estate. But as I alluded to earlier, there is pretty tremendous opportunity in this space as housing costs continue to rise. People still search for affordable homeownership opportunities, and localities are looking for interesting ways to redevelop and revitalize some of these communities. So our coalition wants the state and communities across Virginia to think about, innovative ways to rethink mobile home parks, to preserve them and revitalize them that does not entail a wholesale demolition and redevelopment of them as a different type of housing. So our coalition is made up of a lot of different organizations. A lot of these organizations came together here in Richmond following the potential closure of one very at-risk park, which I won't get into tonight, but I'm happy to tell the story of at another point. But basically, the housing and legal aid community realized that we did not have the infrastructure for protecting and preserving mobile home parks and the residents in these communities when they were faced with a closure or code enforcement and evictions or any other types of stresses that might affect their community. So we needed to build a coalition and an infrastructure to proactively think about these issues. So our mission is to support families living in these parks by giving them access to a legal, financial, and material set of resources and favorable policies, because we know at the end of the day, it is public policy at the state and local levels that affects what's happening in these communities and the ability for these communities to overcome their challenges. So as Mary alluded to, we had the second big symposium that we've held since the coalition formed way back in 2016. Most recently, we had to hold this conference virtually. The original plan was to do this in person, but we had 8 different sessions over the course of a week. I encourage everybody to go look at the YouTube videos for these. You can visit our website and pick and choose, or you can watch all of them together if you're a superstar like Mary and watch all of them. But I think they're very informative and very helpful for people to understand very efficiently some of the topics and issues in this space. So what were some of the challenges that we talked about at this symposium? First of all, we have to start with the home itself and make sure that the homes that are being produced are high quality, but also affordable. And they're not the ones that were getting built in the 1960s and 70s. So we need them to be energy efficient. We need them to be durable to withstand the test of time and weather and whatever else our world is going to throw at them. And make sure they're adaptable to different types of households and families living in them that have accessibility issues or other issues that they may look to their home to provide. And there's really good work in this space, again, that I know Chris and others will get into tonight. The other issue is community ownership and organization. So we move away from the home and to the community. How can we move toward more equitable forms of community ownership? One very well-known example of this is resident ownership, which is a system where residents come together as a cooperative and purchase and operate their park. This is not something we have seen yet in Virginia, but one of our coalition's goals is to bring this model to Virginia. It'll take a while, but we want to stand up that possibility here in the Commonwealth. Most of these resident-owned communities, as of now, are in the Northeast and the Northwest. And what's the benefit of this? Not only just giving residents control and power over their communities, but based on research, we can tell that the lot increases in these resident-owned communities are far below what the average market increases in lot fees and rents are across the nation. So it's really, really important that we look at these alternative models to help promote affordability within these communities. So while we don't have resident ownership yet in Virginia, we do have examples of nonprofit acquisitions of parks. So communities that are purchased by mission-driven entities. So in Charlottesville, the Habitat affiliate there, where Dan Rosensweig is from, and he'll talk about this tonight, they have purchased 2 parks to date. One is called Sunrise, which they have redeveloped very well, and they are currently undergoing a much larger redevelopment and revitalization process with a park called Southwood in Albemarle County. And so they've made really, really impressive strides in Charlottesville and Albemarle. A couple of years ago, a group called Catholics for Housing purchased East End Mobile Home Park in the city of Manassas. That park was facing closure by the city due to significant infrastructure, particularly sewer issues. And so this organization stood up, worked with the residents to acquire the park from a negligent owner, and is now working in concert with the residents and the city to make those infrastructure improvements, to stabilize the park and continue to operate the park as a mobile home park which has been a very impressive undertaking. And so we heard from a board member from Catholics for Housing at our conference and telling that story, which was very, very interesting. And then most recently, we had a park acquisition close to our home base here in Chesterfield County. Project Homes, another local nonprofit housing organization that has previously focused on home ownership, construction, and rehab in the affordable space, purchased a 50-unit park with the assistance of Chesterfield County. And they are looking to do stabilization and revitalization activities and eventually unit replacement to get higher quality, affordable units into the park to give residents a much more high quality, durable home to live in, as opposed to the older units that are currently in the park. We need to move away from predatory financing schemes and with better financing products, not just for the homes, but also for the parks in general. This is something that we are engaging our state housing finance agency with, VHTA. And we need to expand public engagement to break the stereotypes that I mentioned earlier. And this is one of the core aspects of the work of our coalition. And we are happy to have these discussions and do presentations like this throughout communities and different places in Virginia, because we want to chip away at these stereotypes and make sure that policymakers and advocates understand that there's a different way to think about mobile home parks and to preserve them and treat them as communities. So what are the next steps for us, for our coalition at least? We want to see that nonprofit acquisition activity expand throughout the state. So we're hoping to educate nonprofit groups throughout Virginia about what it means to acquire a park. We want to be able to pay attention to the sale of parks and monitor when they come up for sale across the state, because we know they are exchanging hands pretty quickly, and most of those sales happen below the radar. We want to become the resident-owned community affiliate for Virginia. It's a national model run by a national organization called Rock USA. And we want to bring that model to Virginia. It takes a lot to stand that operation up, but that is one of our long-term goals, is to be the provider for resident-owned communities. We want to continue to educate local governments, especially when they are undertaking any type of local zoning update or comprehensive plan update, so that mobile home parks are part of their housing preservation and revitalization strategies that follow in the footsteps of best practices from across Virginia and the country. And we want to maintain our momentum with our state partners, with Virginia Housing, our housing finance agency, and the Department of Housing and Community Development, which have been very supportive of this effort and play a really important role in this. So that's where I'm going to wrap up tonight. And I will look to Mary as to whether or not she wants to do any questions now, or we can save those for later. I am happy to hang around, obviously, to participate in the rest of this evening's agenda. But hopefully that gives everybody on the call tonight a good overview and foundation for some of the discussions and conversations that we'll have moving forward. So Mary, I'll toss the mic back over to you.
Hi, thanks, Jonathan. I think we'll keep the questions for our discussion. We want you to participate, as well as Leah and the mobile home residents. But I'd like to turn it over to them to make a presentation. These are Leah Tenario is the social justice minister at Good Shepherd Catholic Church, and she works very extensively with the mobile homeowners, and actually in all the mobile home parks around the southern part of the middle part of Route 1. And especially recently with the people from Angleside and Ray's home parks, and some of those residents are here with her tonight to kind of talk about what it's like to live in a mobile home community, what they like about it, you know, the ownership, the sense of community, and to kind of put out a third way. They're being proposed next Wednesday at the Planning Commission. It's coming up to put them into the comp plan for change in their status to possibly become a 30 dwelling unit per acre area. The owner has a plan to totally redevelop the area. The county has sort of a plan to keep the residents on the property, and the residents have a different view of what should happen. So we're going to ask them to present their view and what they like about the living in the mobile home park. Leah?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, as Mary said, I'm Director of Social Justice and Hispanic Ministry here at Good Shepherd Church. I've been working here for 21 years now, and in that time I've worked very closely with the residents of the 3 mobile homes that are closest to us: Audubon Trailer Park, Harmony Place, and Ray's Mobile Home in Ingleside. And as Mary mentioned, the Ray's in Ingleside is now being considered for a comprehensive plan revision and possible upzoning to high density residential, with the first Planning Commission public hearing in 2 weeks. And the residents here, you can see some of them. I'm not sure we can see all of them in this view, but we have several of them here, and they've also participated in the previous 2 hearings with the task force. What they are asking is that the county delay any development plans until the Planning Commission can consider the recommendations of the Preservation of Affordable Housing Task Force and others like this panel regarding policies for mobile home parks as affordable housing. To them, this is their home. It's the place where they've invested their life savings. It's an investment in their future. And it's also their community, the place where they've raised their children, where they have their networks of support. And today we have some of the residents here would like to share their stories with you rather than me telling it for them. So let me have, first we have Señora Olga Cisneros. Olga, si quiere puedes quitar la máscara y mover a esa silla ahí, yo creo. O se queda de pie. Sí. Sí. So Olga will speak in Spanish, and Diego Rodriguez is actually here with us tonight from Dan Stork's office. He's going to help me with translation.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Olga Cisneros y vivo en la comunidad de Casas Móviles, en donde estamos todos los aquí presentes, vivimos en esa comunidad. Cada uno de nosotros tenemos una historia. ¿La traducción? Perdón.
So hello there. Good evening, everybody. My name is Olga Cisneros, and I am a resident of a mobile home unit. Everybody present here today is a member of the mobile home community as well.
Pero yo les voy a contar brevemente mi historia. Tengo 14 años de vivir en esa comunidad. El denominador común que tenemos todos nosotros es que en esa casa hemos dejado nuestro sacrificio, nuestros ahorros, y nos ha costado muchísimo adquirirlas, pero estamos muy contentos viviendo ahí.
And I'm here to share with us our personal stories of the residents of these mobile home parks. I have lived in this mobile home community for 14 years, and it has not come easy. We have sacrificed much. We have used many of our savings. And once again, it has not been a difficult process for us to own our mobile home units.
Hemos tenido que trabajar largas jornadas para poder pagar esos préstamos, porque no tenemos la capacidad de tener la cantidad que teníamos que pagar por las casas. Entonces, haciendo préstamos, trabajando dobles turnos, no teniendo ningún día libre, de esa forma pudimos hacernos de nuestras casas.
So we have had to work very hard to own our homes. We have had to take out many loans, and with much sacrifice, working many second shifts with no days off, we have finally been able to become homeowners.
Las casas que nosotros tenemos han sido el albergue para nuestros hijos. Mis hijos personalmente, ellos han crecido, ya estudiaron ahí en esas casas, ahí llegaba el bus a traerlos. Ahora ya pasaron su high school y cuando ellos se vayan no me van a llevar con ellos porque yo tengo mi casa. Entonces, me van a dejar ahí.
So So these are the homes that have become our safe havens. These are the homes where we have seen our children grow up. These are the homes where we have raised our children, and there is no way that, with our children growing up and leaving, that we will leave as well.
El valor de esas casas es de $30,000 en adelante. Yo no puedo decirles exactamente cuánto cuestan, pero son cantidades que a nosotros nos ha costado pagar. Por lo tanto, estamos solicitando quedarnos ahí. Ahí pertenecemos y ahí queremos estar. Gracias por su atención.
These homes have cost us 30 grand plus, and we have had to make many redevelopments and investments in these homes. And what we are asking today is for you to reconsider the reallocation or the relocation of our peoples. Thank you and have a very good night.
Gracias, señora Olga. Ahora tenemos a los señores Imelda y Oscar Castro. ¿Se pueden quedar, creo? ¿Se ven? Ok. Si quieren quitar la máscara para hablar, se pueden.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Imelda Castro. Él es mi esposo.
Buenas noches, Oscar Castro.
Nosotros tenemos 15 años ya de vivir en nuestra casa, en el parqueo de casas móviles. Mi esposo desde el 2007 a la fecha ha tenido muchos problemas de salud. Compramos esa casa, como lo acaba de decir la señora, con mucho sacrificio. Él tiene diferentes condiciones de salud.
Hello, my name is Imelda, and I'm joined by my husband, Oscar Castro. And we have lived in this mobile home community for 15 plus years. And like the woman before us has stated, we have lived in this place and we have sacrificed much to be where we are. Since 2007, my husband has had many chronic health conditions, which have led to.
Yo no cuento con familiares aquí en los Estados Unidos. Y durante el tiempo que mi esposo se ha enfermado, con las personas que yo he contado son con todos mis vecinos. Algunos de ellos han tenido que manejar para mí, para llevarme al hospital, porque antes yo no podía ni siquiera manejar. He tenido que dejarles mis hijos a veces a la 1, 2 de la mañana. Vivimos en una comunidad con gente tranquila, pacífica, que nos tratamos de ayudar unos a los otros.
So I have no family in the United States, and I've had to rely on my neighbors for my husband's health conditions. I do not drive and have not driven. So there were often times where I would rely upon my neighbors to drive me, at 1, 2 in the morning to the hospital and to leave my children under their care at, once again, 1 or 2 in the morning. And this is a community that is safe and that we are comfortable in and that we feel supported in.
Para nosotros sería un cambio muy drástico de vida y sería un impacto bien grande tanto para mí como para mis hijos, porque ellos saben que a la hora que papá está enfermo y mamá lo lleva al hospital, ellos pueden quedarse con alguien de confianza.
So this would be a significant change in the event that we would have to move from the trailer park home, because we would not have the system of support that we usually have, and our children would not have the system of support that we usually have.
Para mi familia, como igual a la de mis vecinos que están aquí presentes, nos ha costado mucho trabajo tanto comprar nuestras casas como acondicionarlas para que nuestra familia tengan un lugar cómodo y digno para vivir.
Like myself and many of us gathered here today, we've had a very difficult time in acquiring our home and the buying of our home. Thank you very much for listening.
Gracias, Imelda y Oscar. Ahora tenemos uno más. We have one more person. We have Mr. Saul Hernandez. Saúl, puede pasar acá para que se vean también. ¿Se ve? ¿Se ve a Saúl?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Saúl Hernández. Tengo 12 años de vivir allí en el lugar donde estamos viviendo ahorita, pues en donde se nos ha comunicado que es posiblemente que perdamos nuestra vivienda.
So hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Saúl Hernández, and I have lived in my community for about 12 years, where we have recently been notified that there may be some changes and developments happening.
Pues a mí en lo personal me dolería mucho el tener que dejar ese lugar, puesto que ya han crecido mis hijos. Ahí es donde veo muchos niños jugar libremente todas las tardes. Ahí es donde ellos pues han tenido sus compañeros de escuela, que les dolería mucho pues apartarse, alejarse de ellos.
Personally, it would be a very painful process for me to leave my community. This is the place where I have raised my children. This is the place where they have grown up playing with other children. And this is the community that I know.
Me da mucho temor saber que tenga que mudarme a otro lugar en el cual no sé qué clase de vecinos pueda tener, cómo puede estar el problema de la delincuencia, pandillas, y gracias a Dios donde vivimos nos sentimos libres de todo eso, pues es un lugar muy sano, muy bonito y estamos muy encariñados ahí todos nosotros.
I am very fearful of moving to an unknown location where I do not know my neighbors, where there could be delinquent activities happening, such as gang activity. And I find it very regretful that I will leave the comfort and the support that I know in my community.
Me gustaría pedirles que por favor pues se nos permita allí retirarnos para pasar nuestra vejez tranquilo, de una forma en paz, como siempre hemos vivido todos estos 12 años que yo he vivido en este lugar.
And I would like for you to consider our words as you think about the development that's going to happen here in these trailer park communities.
Me gustaría siempre conservar la vivienda que tengo, gracias a Dios, que con sacrificio y mucho trabajo, pues hemos pagado más de $30,000 lo que cuesta ahorita la vivienda, y sería pues para nosotros una gran alegría quedarnos ahí por siempre.
And I would like for you to consider my community and the amount of time and the effort and the money that I have spent on my mobile home unit, which is $30K plus. And I would like for you to consider this and let us have the opportunity to grow old in the community that we love.
Muchas gracias. Me gustaría que tomaran en cuenta, por favor, nuestra petición a nombre de la comunidad de vecinos donde vivimos, y que ojalá pues tomen en cuenta y en consideración nuestro deseo de quedarnos allí con nuestros hijos. Gracias.
So please consider our words and our personal narratives as you think about the redevelopment of our mobile home park. And I speak for everybody here when I say, please consider these words. Thank you very much and have a great night.
Thank you, Mary, and all of you who are here with the panel for including the residents in this. I thank Mary for the initiative to include the residents in a panel about mobile home communities and their perspective. And as Mary has said, nothing about us without us. So thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Leah, and thank you, residents. Thank you so much for coming out and telling us about your community and your life there. And we really, really appreciate that. It makes a big difference to everybody. So thank you. I'm going to now turn to our panelists. We have 4 people here who represent really different aspects of mobile home community development. And I'm going to let them take a couple minutes to introduce themselves, but I can tell you we have Dan Rosensweig, who is with Habitat for Humanity, and he has developed some mobile home parks in the Charlottesville area. He's actually converted them from mobile home parks to, as we say, stick houses. But he's done this very much with the participation of the residents, and no one has been displaced. We also have Jill Norcross from Virginia Housing. She's the Virginia Housing Community Outreach Regional Manager with Northern Virginia for Virginia Housing. And they have been working closely with a lot of the people doing this mobile home park work throughout the state. Dan Cohen is Director of Community Enhancement. What a great title. Do we have one of those in Fairfax County? I don't know. He worked with a group to purchase a mobile home park and retain it and improve it as a mobile home park for residents, which is kind of what we're hoping for here. And then Chris Nicely was one of the great moderators in the mobile home conference, and has a very wide range of knowledge. And he's going to tell us especially about different forms of ownership that have been accomplished around the country. Resident owned, municipal ownership, nonprofit, community land trust models, and some of the innovations in manufactured housing. So I want to let you guys introduce yourselves and say a few words and maybe show some of your pictures. And then we're going to ask a set of questions that the task force has come up with to have a discussion among these people, plus Leah and her group, and also Jonathan. We want you to chime in on answering this, and then we'll go to Q&A from the audience. Okay, Dan, do you want to start? I see you're out there in your nice community.
Sure. I'll go ahead and share my screen because I do have a few pictures. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that Jonathan talked about all the different ways that are available for working with residents of mobile home communities to maintain secure tenure or maintain the ability to stay there over time. Our model is just one model. It's fairly widely touted, but I think it in many ways is a kind of almost a last resort. That I think the resident owned community model is a really great one, and I'm really delighted to see that that there's an effort afoot to bring a ROC affiliate to Virginia, because I've been trying to do that for many years. But I want to tell you a little bit about what we do here in Charlottesville and why we've done it. So we're a little bit different than most habitats in that we work in communities. We have to in Charlottesville because land prices are so high. We went out looking for an opportunity to do mixed income developments many years ago. We've now done 9 mixed income communities, but our mission goes well beyond that. There's a real intersection in mobile home parks because, as Jonathan mentioned, they're really threatened not just here in Charlottesville, but across the country. And as you all know very well, you're kind of living that up there right now. But there are 20 million people across the nation who live in trailers who don't have right to the land underneath them. And so we set about to work with the community that was under extreme immediate threat. This was the Sunrise community near downtown Charlottesville in 2004. The residents got a knock on their door one night and said, hey, come to a school and they're going to get a presentation. And the developer was all excited about his plans to build luxury condos there. The residents were going to get, a 2 months notice and be kicked out. They were mostly all seniors with declining or no income. Many of them had lived there for 40 years. And so by the grace of God, Habitat stepped in. I wasn't with the organization at the time, but they stepped in and said, we have no idea how to do this, but it's a matter of faith. And they purchased Sunrise and they promised the residents that they'd work together and figure out how to redevelop it without displacing a single person there. And so had food and charrettes and got together, and the residents created a vision for the community that was based on what they really liked about what was there before and what they saw for the future. And now Sunrise is a neighborhood of front porches and back porches and open space for the community to use. There's a multifamily apartment. So most of the residents there actually wanted apartment living rather than single family homes, because even the 2 steps to get up into their homes were getting to be kind of a challenge for them given their age. This is Mr. Conley, who grew tomatoes and continued to grow tomatoes up until his passing last year. As far as we know, it's the first trailer park transformation in the nation into a mixed income development without any resident displacement. We're proud of that, but at the same time, we don't want to rest on our laurels or think that we've done enough, because we never feel like we've done enough. And in the process of working with the residents at Sunrise to figure out what we were going to do there, the folks at Southwood came to us and said, would you consider doing the same thing? And they convinced the owner of the Southwood Mobile Home Park, who has a good heart, but she didn't have the wherewithal to keep the mobile home park up to a decent standard, came to us and asked if we would purchase it. And with the help of VHDA, we did. Southwood is huge. It's at a scale that was kind of unthinkable before. It's 123 acres, 1,500 people, the vast majority of whom are Latinx. So it's about 85% Hispanic. And there's about 15% of the people, of those 15%, about 10% have been there for more than 30 years. And we established core values starting with non-displacement, but taking an asset-based approach and community engagement is really at the heart of what we do. As Jonathan said, most people look at a mobile home park who don't know the people who live there, and they see it as, they see the surface stuff. They see, they see graffiti or they see rusted out trailers, but they don't look at what's really there. And once we started looking at what's really there, the people, the hope for the future, the love of family, the love of food, the love of parties, we thought to ourselves, we can really build on that. And so we started asking them what they were willing to do to make it happen, what they wanted to do, and what their vision for the future was. And their vision for the future actually wasn't it continuing as a mobile home park. They wanted a community that was welcoming, that there was a place for everybody there. But they wanted real estate. They wanted homes that were permanent, that appreciated. Almost everybody at Southwood owned their trailer as so they're all of owners of a fashion, and most of them had put on 1, 2, 3 additions on their trailer. The problem was the infrastructure was just failing. There was sewage bubbling up out of the ground, sewage backing up into kids' trailers catching fire. And so we've been working together with folks there for 12 years to come up with a plan of development. I love this, Mary talked about the slogan, never about us, without us. That's our slogan there too. And the residents got together for about 3 years. They've been working together to put together a plan of development. They came up with the first, what's called a form-based code in the history of Albemarle County. What a form-based code is a rezoning classification that isn't really specific about what happens from spot to spot. It has general framework and general rules. And the reason they did that is so that communities, sub-communities could get together and actually design their own pocket neighborhoods, neighborhood by neighborhood by neighborhood. Eventually, Southwood will probably be about 15 different phases, 15 different neighborhoods. These are the first 32 families that got together over the course of about a year, and they designed this first village. Things that they really prioritized was a really wonderful place for seniors. That sort of built on what was already great about Southwood. People hang out outside at Southwood. They don't hang out in their trailers. They love to gather. And they wanted to create a space that was unique, that was welcoming to everybody, but was especially accommodating for some of the older folks in the community. They also wanted a bunch of little pocket parks because they wanted Southwood to be welcoming to new people coming to the community. So they wanted places for folks to gather from all walks of life. And most importantly, they love soccer. And so the central park in this first village is going to feature a soccer field. The homes will have kitchens on the back so parents can cook and watch their kids play soccer together. And so we're really excited. There are many different choices. People can purchase a condominium unit. They can purchase a single family detached unit. We're piloting a program where somebody can buy a detached unit and also buy an accessory dwelling unit, because that's kind of what happens at Southwood already. You have a family who owns a trailer that may be 600 square feet, and they rent out the extra trailer to somebody who may be a seasonal worker or a cousin who's trying to get established. We wanted to, and we think that that's positive and that's good. It was just happening in too cramped of a space. And so rather than selling out to people who are going to make money on the backs of the folks there, we're trying to help people create equity in the homes that they own, but also in the homes that they rent. So they'll be renting the accessory units to people who live in Southwood. We're also working with other partners to make Southwood an opportunity for other folks as well. So we're partnering with Piedmont Housing Alliance to do a low-income housing tax credit multifamily apartment. We're partnering with market rate builders to build townhomes. This is the precedent image that we gave them for one section of the neighborhood. And after we developed the first phase, and you'll notice the first phase is on the area of Southwood that has no trailers on it now. And that was really, really important for the folks at Southwood. They wanted us to plan and build something that became this kind of shining model that people could come and see and experience. And rather than saying, hey, you know, you're in the way for the next one, it allows people to move from one side to the other. And then people who may not be excited about it now can come and see it and get excited about planning for the future. So we're really, really tickled to say that after so many years of the residents working so hard together, we broke ground on September 18th. And come this time next year, the first homes will be built. And so that's just a, sort of in a nutshell of what we do. Again, it's one way of doing things. But when people call me and ask me, you know, what should we do? There's a lot of development pressure on our mobile home park. And the first thing I say is, well, let's deal with the most important thing, and that's getting a right to be on the land. And through resident-owned community or a land trust or some sort of model where you take that, or a nonprofit stepping in to purchase it, that's the first thing that sort of happens. Otherwise, people end up kind of blowing to the wind. So thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Dan. That's really amazing. You've really done something there. Jill Norcross from the Virginia Housing. Tell us how Virginia Housing has been thinking about this and what you've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for inviting me tonight. And I want to just say what a privilege it is for me to have heard from the residents. So I really appreciate that you making a point that they had time to tell their stories, and just how valuable that is for people like me who work on programs and policy. So very grateful for that. As Mary said, I'm the Community Outreach Regional Manager for Virginia Housing. We are formerly VHDA, so you'll probably hear those interchanged throughout the evening. But we are the State Housing Finance Agency. We're self-supporting. We don't receive any taxpayer dollars to fund our programs, but we raise money through the capital markets, and we contribute a significant portion of our revenues each year to help meet the most difficult housing needs around the state. And mobile home community preservation is certainly one of those. So I'm going to just tell you about a few things that Virginia Housing has really stepped up our efforts around the last 3 or 4 years around strategies to support manufactured housing. We've done it through supporting research and advocacy. We've also done a lot of work connecting with the manufactured housing industry. We've increased our local government awareness to try to influence policy. And probably what's most relevant tonight, we've improved existing mobile home communities through pilot programs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we've expanded manufacturing housing homeownership opportunities as well. So you've heard from Dan, and you'll hear from others about specific pilot programs that we've been able to contribute some financing to around the state. So I'll just share a little bit more about some others. And Jonathan referenced this in his presentation, but the Manassas East End Mobile Home Park, which is an amazing program that was 58 occupied units and 4 vacant lots over 7 acres in the city of Manassas. It was purchased by CFH. They're formerly known as Catholics for Housing, a mission-oriented nonprofit owner. We provided them with some grant support through our community impact grant that allowed them to make further improvements to the site, like additional lighting, some tree work and landscaping. They have a community building on site that we were able to help finance their enhancement and renovation of that. We also financed some of the surveying and delineating of their lot boundaries. And we were able, through a pilot program, to provide permanent financing to the nonprofit, a 30-year below market loan. So we were really proud to be able to be part of that. And the second example I'll just use is something a little further away in Buckingham County, in the part of the state, a more rural area. We worked with a private owner community that had 17 single-wide mobile homes, but only 8 of them were habitable. So we were able to work with the private owner, because it was a really important resource for affordable housing. And there are people living there that commuted as far away as Charlottesville. So we wanted to see that community maintained. There was also some additional land involved, so we to provide additional units. So we provided technical assistance to that community. We coordinated with a manufacturer to ensure that new units would meet minimum design standards. We provided a pre-development loan for the replacement homes, and really just worked hard to preserve the community there. So in addition, we're also trying to work hard at expanding homeownership opportunities for owners. We have a new construction to permanent loan product that we're working through that came out of our advisory councils. And there's a lot of conversation, I think, within the agency to try to move these efforts forward. Again, as Jonathan mentioned, we are investing a lot of resources and innovation around manufactured housing. We gave a grant to a local partner to develop an enhanced manufactured home and to help document the costs so we could see that. And we're always looking at construction alternatives for replacement units of mobile homes. Those might be considered shipping containers, but we're looking for things that are scalable in size, durable, energy efficient, and have low maintenance costs as well. So with that, I will turn it over to the other panelists and looking forward to your questions.
Okay, thanks. Wow, that's a lot you're doing. I think Dan might have interacted with you at some point. Dan Cohen, the Director of Community Enhancement. Dan, tell us what you're doing in Chesterfield County. Are you there, Dan? Yeah, hi, Dan.
Can you just put up one of the pictures there while I talk?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I've got
it's no problem.
A second call, but now I'm back.
Okay.
Which one would you like to start with?
The first one. It's okay. It's really
number one.
It's really just a graphic representation of where we're headed. So let me just tell you something. My name is Dan Cohen. As Mary said, I'm the Director of Community Enhancement. I think you should go, let's see, the other way, to the very first one. Let's see. Nope. Here
we go. Right here?
Yeah, start there.
The file names have a number on them.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You know, they say to start with the end in mind. So I just wanted to run through a couple of slides during the course of my conversation with you this evening to show you where we're headed, and perhaps you can see these slides. You know, they call the department in Chesterfield Community Enhancement because they didn't really want to use the term revitalization, because they thought that might be a pejorative term telling folks that they need to have their corridors or their neighborhoods revitalized. So they settled on the word community enhancement. The department is only 3.5 years old. I've been there for about 2.5 years. The county does not have a housing department, but in fact, we've become the de facto housing department. I have a housing background that lasts 35 years or so. I will tell you one thing that I think is very important from my perspective is that when I was still living in California, I worked at that point in time on the largest anti-displacement project in the history of the state of California. So from my perspective, the goal has always been in working with the manufactured home communities is to prevent displacement as well as just rehabilitation. We have 21 manufactured housing communities in Chesterfield County, the majority of which are located in what we call Route 1, or sometimes still in the vernacular, Jefferson Davis Highway. That total is about 1,662 units in total, and the parks range from 16 units to 95 units, so they're not nearly as large as Dan's situation in Charlottesville. The county passed a comprehensive plan about 2 years ago, which talked about trying to save the manufactured homes that exist there. And about 2 years ago, undertook what's called the special area plan, which is like a master plan for the corridor, which clearly states in the plan how important it is to stabilize and improve the existing mobile home park community. Now, most of the manufactured housing that's along the Route 1 corridor is zoned what we call MH1, Manufactured Housing 1. There's only 2 parks that actually have zoning, that's commercial zoning, that would or could allow, with a zone change, multifamily housing. And at the moment, quite frankly, we don't have the development pressures that I think you have up in the northern part of Virginia. But I think we're probably about a year or 2 behind, to say the least, of where those pressures are. Now, in specifically talking about Bermuda Estates, which, as Jonathan mentioned, is about a 57, 58 mobile home park community. There were, when I got there 2.5 years ago, 310 code violations on that piece of property, which is preposterous when you really think about it. And the county didn't really know what to do, to be honest with you, because they didn't necessarily want to displace anybody. So they basically took a very hands-off approach to the situation. But then, unfortunately, there was a fire in a couple of the units there, okay? And that, I think, raised the awareness in the county officials as well as the staff that they needed to do something about it. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, which was really a good thing. We have a very well-informed, very progressive county attorney who's working on the situation. And we have a very nice relationship in the county among the building inspection department, the planning department, and the community enhancement department. And it's unlike any situation that I've seen either as a private consultant or a nonprofit developer or somebody who works for county government, that we have a really good working relationship among the different departments. So one of the things that the county attorney did, which I think was really, really stellar, is when we were making our notices of violation, and the code enforcement officers in the county are actually in the community enhancement department, and we have 6. And we actually have 1 community enhancement person who's just dedicated to the Route 1 corridor. Every time that we cited a mobile home park for a violation, we also made sure that we cited the owner of the mobile home park. And what we came to the conclusion of is there were severe zoning violations. And those zoning violations were the linchpin to getting the owner to do something, because those zoning violations are clearly the fault of the owner of the park and not necessarily lie at the doorstep of the person who lives in the unit itself. And to be honest with you, that's not to say that there's not some fault, so to speak, with some of the homeowners. I mean, a lot of folks did a lot of illegal additions. They added porches, they rewired the homes, and they didn't get a permit. But the situation for us was where we cited the owner, where we cited the owner of the unit, we also cited the owner of the property as well for allowing that situation to take place in the first place. And that was really very interesting. So as you might imagine, over the course of more than a year's worth of time, we were wrestling, with the owner of the mobile home park, because quite frankly, this individual didn't want to do anything at all. Because as you all know who are involved in this arena, the cash that's thrown off for mobile homes is astronomical, to say the least. It's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on a yearly basis. So as we continued to put pressure on the owner of the mobile home park, he actually came to the county, to the Economic Development Department, and he asked us for help with the sale of the property. He hired a commercial broker who actually built a prospectus, which was very interesting because it showed us exactly how much money they were making on a monthly and an annual basis. And it really quite showed you, to be polite, what an inappropriate owner of property he really was, okay? And that was really interesting. So because of what I do for a living, I had a relationship with a nonprofit organization. They're called Project Homes. And I brought it to their attention, as a matter of fact, in the hope that we could find a nonprofit owner for the mobile home park. And quite frankly, they were willing to step to the plate. Again, another 8 or 9 months transpired, to be honest with you, and negotiations went on between the nonprofit potential buyer and the existing owner. We actually held back on pursuing the notices of violation as best as we possibly could, because we knew we might be able to reach a deal. And in point of fact, over the course of the last 9 months, and it's only 1 month old, Project Homes actually purchased the property, as a matter of fact, which is really a wonderful thing to have happen and a blessing. One thing I want to add that really helped us, and really I would suggest to perhaps some of you up in Fairfax, is with the help of VHDA and Community Development Block Grant money, we hired the Virginia Poverty Law Center to actually do a survey of the manufactured home communities along the park. They went door to door and did a resident survey. So we have a very good idea of not only who lives in Bermuda Estates, which is the park that we're talking about tonight, but all the rest of the communities that are along the corridor. And that was very helpful for us. Mary, I'm happy to share that survey with you. You can use that as an example. And quite frankly, I got the notion to do something like that from what happened down in Orange County, North Carolina, which is where Chapel Hill was, as a matter of fact. And so we took that really as our cue. As you might imagine, the majority of folks who live in this development are Latinx. It's really nice to be able to work with Project Homes. They've already hired somebody who's fully bilingual to go into the park and actually talk to residents about what's happening. They've already put on the ground a half-time maintenance person and a half-time management person, you know, as a matter of fact, to begin to help with the redevelopment of the park. And the goal, and if Matt, you can show some of those pictures again, and you can just run through them. What Project Homes has been doing is they've been talking to different owners, different manufacturers of homes that perhaps that we can replace on the site. Unlike Dan's example, our goal isn't to repurpose this into a multifamily community, but rather over time, replace the units with something that actually looks like what you're looking at right now, one by one by one by one. I've set aside in my CDBG budget $435,000 we can use for repair and replacement of mobile homes. And also, as Jill said, there's some innovation grant money around as well that actually will probably help us repurpose some of these homes as well. And I think it's probably going to take about 2 years for us to get to the point where we can replace all the units. It is a goal, my personal goal, to get to the point that Jonathan raised, and I think it's fair to say as well with the nonprofit partner, be able to get to a point where perhaps the residents of the mobile home park can actually purchase the dirt underneath which their homes sit. That would be a major goal, to say the least, because that's very important, and it really will lead to long-term and what I would argue permanently affordable housing, to say the least. It could be a land trust model, because we actually have a community land trust and land bank in the county, but it also could be something in the form of something like a limited equity housing co-op, which I happen to have a lot of experience, you know, in my life too. And so I'm looking forward actually to working with Project Homes and the residents there, as a matter of fact, to try and get to that particular goal in mind. So again, I want to thank all of you for your time this evening, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you, Dan. That's really inspirational. Our next panelist is Chris Nicely, who I'm hoping he has a very broad view, which is interesting in addition to the very specific projects. And I'm hoping he can tell us about some innovations in different kinds of land purchase, land ownership, as well as some innovation in financing and design in a couple minutes. He's the only person I can think of who might actually be able to do that.
Well, Mary, appreciate that, and thank you for letting me be a part of this the panel, and really the efforts and a lot of the different options in land ownership and community ownership have been discussed already, and so I'll just highlight that, and it'll be very, very quick to do that. A little bit of background on Next Step. Next Step is a nonprofit organization that operates on a national scale with nonprofits and municipalities as well as private stakeholders in understanding how factory-built housing can be utilized in the affordable housing issues that face every community. In the community side of it, the mobile home parks or manufactured home communities that we've seen, typically we get involved in the repair and replacement programs, whether it's with a habitat or whether it's with a nonprofit or even the owners themselves. So we see a lot of different models and we get involved in infill and replacement and that type of thing. The ownership models that we see growing in interest and potential is the resident-owned community. Certainly Rock USA is a big leader in that. So I'm glad to see that you've already networked with them. The co-op model is popular in some parts of the country, and that allows all the residents to have a part ownership in that community and has control on truly that land insecurity that they would have with a private owner. And then we see community land trusts is now really starting to be discussed about, and community land trusts, they can control the cost element of the rent associated with that land ownership and the expectations associated with appreciation and return associated with the land. So I'm really interested in watching the land trust side of things as it develops and gets going. Without a doubt, some of the most interesting models right now are the nonprofit ownership and even municipal ownership. And so we see, because affordable housing is such a critical issue in most municipalities, it's getting a very focused attention from elected officials and administration and that type of thing. And what we're seeing is they are starting to recognize the importance of manufactured housing communities as an affordable place that people in the city and in the community can live and have lived for decades. And all the surveys and focus groups and that type of thing of what constitutes a home to people, and it really boils down to family, and in a community where you're so close for so long, the extended family. So when we start talking about the possible displacement of family, that really starts to erode the potential for the feeling of home. So we're really interested in the municipal purchase of manufactured home communities and investing in the infrastructure, putting programs in place for replacement and repair of homes, energy additions of energy saving elements to each home, and then this nonprofit ownership model. We have several members that are nonprofit owners of multiple manufactured home communities in an effort to preserve that affordable housing. So with looking at ROC, or resident-owned communities, co-ops, community land trusts, municipal ownership of manufactured home communities, and nonprofit ownership of manufactured home communities, we're really starting to see innovative efforts associated with the whole park ownership and then the management side of this. It's so important. And what you're doing today, Mary and others, what you're doing today, become informed, find support, stand up, and then speak out, ask for what you want. It's not something just to express concern and outrage, but you have to express what you expect and what you want to happen, and then continue to apply constant pressure and energy towards it. As you've heard, this doesn't happen fast, but it won't happen at all if you don't express your energy, your passion for it. So hats off to this meeting, hats off to the residents, and all the innovative stuff that's going on in Virginia. And I will tell you, people are watching Virginia. In manufactured factory-built housing, Virginia is a leader on the East Coast of what can be possible with factory-built housing, and there's no reason in the world why they can't find and see what is possible with different forms of manufactured home community ownership. And I will tell you, and I don't think it's any secret, what Dan and Habitat is doing down at Charlottesville is extremely interesting and being watched by many. So I applaud that. It's very exciting, and that whole notion of nothing about us without us can't be more fitting than what you're doing today. So I appreciate being a part of it. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, thanks very much. This is really exciting to me. I've learned a lot of new things since I've been engaging with you guys. I want to ask a few questions now for discussion that have been brought up by our steering committee, and then we'll open it up. And the first one is to just kind of focus this. We've gotten a lot of information here, but just to focus by asking, and you don't all have to answer every question, but whoever wants to can jump in. What is the main advantage of preserving mobile home parks as affordable housing? The advantage both to the residents, they get the advantage, but also to the local government. Local government's interested in affordable housing, but they've often thought of mobile home parks as sort of trash that needs to be redeveloped. And I think they're just beginning to see some of the advantages of actually investigating and investing in these parks. And I would love to see some kind of a cost comparison that shows, to build affordable housing, to donate the land, to work with an affordable housing developer, to give a subsidy, to get, all the things that go into building regular affordable housing, which is often, apartments. It's rental housing, and it's multi-story, many families. What are the costs involved in a unit of that versus the costs of making a land trust and providing some manufactured housing? I haven't seen any analysis of that, but I don't know if anybody else has. Is it cheaper to do this, or is it, why do this instead of building new affordable housing?
Mary, that's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to, but I would love to explore that a little bit more. But I will answer the first part of your question, which is, what are the advantages of preserving these parks? And I think there's a number of them, when I'm sure the other panelists will have their reasons, but I'll just mention one, which is that in many, if not all cases, these parks are very cohesive, strong communities of people that have bonds with one another. And preserving those bonds by means of preserving their actual homes, it's kind of hard to quantify that, but that is really important for not just their own community, but for the infrastructure and health of the larger community, to make sure that those residents who are working the essential jobs that keep our community going and sending their children to school, or in person or virtually, keeping that community together cohesively and preserving it, I think is really important. And that's tough to quantify, and it's why the residents getting engaged and speaking up like they are tonight, I think is really important. So there's a lot of numeric reasons, I think, but just from a community point of view, the preservation of parks is a really important thing that I don't think can be understated.
I think COVID made that answer really pretty clear. This is kind of building on what Jonathan said. When COVID hit, we reached out to every single family in our park and found that the vast majority of them were frontline workers. They were working in pharmacies, or serving food at the hospital, or were working in elder care facilities. And our community would have shut down without the heroic efforts of the people at Southwood. So that's the sort of positive side. The other side too is that I really like Chris's model, because you're turning what's taxed as chattel into real estate, and so there's a financial gain for the municipality. And if you can make the case for a financial gain for the municipality via increased taxation or tax collection, you can make a case for what's called tax increment financing, or the municipality essentially paying for upgrades and improvements that they'll get back over time. It'll essentially be financed with incremental financing through real estate taxation. So, and then as Jonathan said, they tend to be really great places. And to break up a community, you would never go into an upper middle class neighborhood in Charlottesville or Fairfax or anywhere and say, hey, what's the benefit of keeping this place? It's a neighborhood. Yeah.
So Mary, I'd like to add one more thing, just from the dollar side of things. The gap dollars between constructing a new unit of multifamily housing and what it would take actually to subsidize someone who's low to moderate income, $90,000 a unit. It doesn't cost that much to replace a manufactured home. Okay, that's one major reason why it's very important also financially to preserve what you already have. It's most likely always going to be cheaper to do that than it is to build, to build new. And so sometimes I agree with what Jonathan said and what Dan said. The preservation of the community is of the utmost importance. But I would ask everybody, where do we get all that money from to fill that gap? And it's because it's so large, and as most of you know, the cost of construction, and Dan, I know you know this, has gone up phenomenally. Not only just there's labor shortages are there, and material costs have gone up, so that the price per unit is it's skyrocketing.
And Mary, I would add to one of the primary advantages, and what's the advantage of displacing the residents in the manufactured home community and pushing them further and further away from their jobs? And that's part of a critical analysis the city has to understand as to where those people go, the first line, first responders, essential workers, and that's been heightened. That awareness, that sensitivity has been heightened during this pandemic. But one of the main advantages of maintaining communities of any kind is to keep people close to where they work, keep people close in the community that they live, and strengthen that whole neighborhood fabric or fiber associated with that personality of that particular area. So you're really, when you displace or go in and redevelop a manufactured home community, you're displacing that culture and that heritage that's really been established over generations and decades in that manufactured home community. So that's that. And from a municipality standpoint, you have the opportunity to go in and reduce blight and maintain semblance of the certain crime levels. And those are important features as well as maintaining a home place for people that are essential workers. So it's critical.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's one of our main issues along Route 1 is to have redevelopment or have development without displacement. We don't want to push out all of our old communities in order to make way for new communities. Why do that?
I'll just add, Mary, as a Fairfax County resident myself, just the one, Fairfax initiative and the equity policy that I'm so proud our county was able to develop. And I think that's, something really important that we continue to raise up and discuss as we're talking about redevelopment to preserve these communities. So thanks.
Right. So that Run Fairfax equity policies, which are starting to reach into the comp plan and the whole real estate development area. And that's going to be a really big area for that policy. What do people find are the biggest hurdles? Another question, especially in an area that's developing that has rising land prices. Is it the stigma, the financing, the getting a management entity? Is it zoning and comp plan rules? What are the biggest hurdles that you guys have found that need to be dealt with?
I'll chop at that first, I guess. And you said it all in that statement. I think the biggest hurdles are, number one, return on that original owner's investment and what that offers that investor when he were to sell or redevelop that land. Number one, that's a big challenge. Number two, it's perception of not only the communities, not only the housing, but the residents of those communities. So it's a misperception issue. And then without a doubt, it's zoning that it also creates that hurdle. So I think those, from my aspect, looking on a national level, what I see in other areas and hurdles we have to get across, those are the big ones, I think, that we wrestle with every day.
Let me follow up on that. When zoning, we have a number of different zonings for our mobile home parks. One of them is the biggest one is kind of stable. It's zoned as a mobile home park, and that's it. But some of the other ones are zoned both mobile home park and commercial, highway, C8 highway commercial, with the idea, I think, that at some point they could just choose which zoning they wanted. And if they wanted to develop commercially, they could just do that without going through a process. And that's true of the Angleside Rays mobile home park, where the residents are from. And anyway, what kind of zoning is that? And what kind of zoning is good for a mobile home park? If we're doing a new zoning code, what kind of things should we be looking at?
As I said, in Chesterfield, the overwhelming majority of the mobile home parks are zoned MH1. We have a new classification called MH3 that has just higher standards, but it still only allows for manufactured homes to be on that particular site. So anybody who wanted to come in and redevelop those properties would have to come and request a rezoning. Of course, you're allowed to do that in Chesterfield. You could also apply for conditional use permits, as well. But, then it goes to the Planning Commission, then ultimately to the Board of Supervisors. So at least in Chesterfield at the moment, there's not a desire to remove those places where people currently live with something else. And so that portends very well for the stabilization, of the court. And as I said, it's codified in what is our special area plan, our master plan, and which was adopted by the board. So it is codified policy. So that's been extraordinarily helpful, and I think has actually perhaps, prevented more things from occurring.
Mm-hmm. What about the financing hurdle? I know people have talked about struggling to get the money together to purchase the mobile home parks, and the owner does expect to be able to sell it for market rate. Where have you found financing to help out with that? You got some from the state. We've got some. I mean, who chips in to help buy the mobile home parks?
I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I had died, $430,000 that could be used for repair and replacement of CDBG. That was years ago. We could set aside some additional, funds as well that will help out. And VHDA is also going to be somewhat supportive of this one particular project, but it's going to take several pots of money, to continue to provide what we're trying to do, in Bermuda Estates. And I hope, and Jonathan, I think it's very fair that, we hope that what happens in Bermuda is the example. I mean, again, very different from what Dan's doing and Habitat's doing in Charlottesville. But we need to have more examples of what it is that we're talking about. So it's not just a theoretical exercise anymore, that it's a practical exercise of what you're doing. That's, to me, is what the whole ball of wax is in Bermuda, is to show folks that we can actually pull this off very successfully.
Yeah, I think Mary, I think it sort of depends on the model, and my opinion is that the model, sort of what you do with the mobile home park, whether you keep it as a mobile home park, whether you convert it incrementally via the next step model, whether it's a resident-owned community, whether you do a complete transformation, has to do with the reality of the physical reality of the park, with the land cost, and frankly with what the residents want. And so, we're doing what we're doing because we were kind of forced. We sort of were forced to. So the first mobile home park that we purchased, we overpaid for it because we had to, because the peril of not overpaying for it was that the residents faced eviction in 2 months. Having put that much money into paying for it, we needed to rezone it, sell out parcels to begin to subsidize the affordable component of it. In the second trailer park, what we purchased, again, thank God for VHDA, now Virginia Housing, because they came in each case with a loan to help us purchase the park. We paid $7 million for the second park.
Wow.
That's a lot, but when you consider that it was probably worth about $9 million at the time, but we worked with the owner who had a good heart. She just didn't have the wherewithal to take care of it. She sold it to us a little bit below market value. Still $7 million is a lot for a nonprofit to pay. We spent 12 years stabilizing operations of the park, working with the residents. We've only raised pad rental fees once, so people are still paying, I think, $260 a month for pad rental fees, where the market would probably bear about $900 a month for the fee here.
Yeah, our folks are paying closer to $9.
Yeah, but we've kept those artificially low, but we've fundraised a lot. We've raised, in the millions of dollars. And we've brought volunteers in to support the park, but ultimately, because of the condition of the park, I mean, it's really the underlying condition of the infrastructure is such that simply replacing the units that are on the land now with new units is a non-starter, because it's all failing. And so it's really sort of the only direction we can go. So a big part of our financing is, again, the mixed income model, where we make better use of the land. We appended some land next to it. We rezoned it to a higher density. We're selling a lot of the out parcels, and that subsidizes the affordable part of it.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. I was just going to add, obviously, you know, Virginia Housing's continuing to try to push innovation and financing as well as new construction models. But anybody involved with affordable housing knows that it just takes so many different sources of funding and different partners as well. And it's no different for preserving mobile home communities. This is a naturally occurring affordable housing resource. And so the preservation of these communities, like others, it's really difficult. It's challenging. You have to take advantage of every opportunity, and often our nonprofit partners or localities can't pay the top dollar. They can't move as quickly as some of the market rate developers. So we're just trying to provide all different kind of resources, a lot of tools in the toolbox that are necessary.
I'll also add just very briefly that philanthropy, I think, plays an important role in this. I know the local community foundations and other foundations here in the Richmond area have supported the efforts around our coalition for sure, and the acquisition of Bermuda Estates in Chesterfield. And so I think there's obviously large philanthropy networks in Northern Virginia. And I would encourage you all to make sure that those grant makers are aware of mobile home parks and aware of the challenges, and that you all can communicate with our help, that we're happy to, you know, how their money can be used to fill in those gaps or provide assistance either in the short term or long term for the preservation, preservation of these communities.
Let me add one more thing, which I forgot to mention to sort of jump onto that, is that philanthropy comes in a lot of different forms. And the woman that we bought the park from was a philanthropist, not just in that she discounted the land, but really what made it possible for us to invest in deferred maintenance was, since the time that we purchased it, she's offered us an interest-only loan. So we've been paying interest only since we purchased it. She makes a healthy amount. We write a big check every month, but not nearly as much as if we were paying principal and interest. But that's enabled us to actually create a surplus between fundraising and operations that we plow right back into temporary fixes in the mobile home park. So I would not be shy about asking owners of the park if they were interested in doing that. There are also tax advantages of that. They don't suffer a capital gains hit. So there are a lot of ways to structure it in partnership with the current owner of the park, and they're not all awful people. Again, the woman that we worked with in many ways is kind of a saint. She could have sold it for a lot more.
Okay, let me ask a question about the advantages, the homeownership advantages to the residents. Mobile home ownership has been called both the best and the worst form of home ownership. It's best because it's quite cheap, but it's worst because it's very unstable and that you don't own the land. If there's a land trust or a nonprofit, does that enable mobile homeowners to get a conventional mortgage with a lower interest rate and to build equity in their homes? Like, can't do that right now because they have to get what amounts to a car loan with a higher interest rate, and they don't build equity, they lose equity like you do with your car. So one of the main things that we'd like to promote for low-income people is the ability to build wealth. And can you talk about how these forms of ownership and securing the land can help people build wealth?
Let me take a stab at that. That is an issue that's being increasingly recognized. And right now it is not being addressed. So there's no, I don't think, unless one of the other panelists know, I don't know that there's an immediate answer to say, yes, you can get lower rate by going here longer term. But what I do know is that Freddie and Fannie, or Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, are looking at how chattel financing can be done in a better way so that the home buyer will be able to experience lower rate and longer term and get away from the title financing that is common now with what's called chattel finance, and that's home only finance. I don't know there's a lot of options right now, but there is some pressure out there to go in the direction that you just talked about.
Yeah, without getting into the weeds too much, there are options that we don't have full access to in Virginia at the moment that do allow kind of they're a stopgap measure for homeowners and home buyers who place their mobile homes in parks to have their homes titled and treated as real estate, and then access higher quality home financing products that allow them to build equity, unlike a traditional personal property chattel loan, which we've talked about. One example is through the USDA Rural Development Office. They have a pilot program which they've done in Vermont and also maybe some other states where residents who place a home that they purchase into a park where they are able to have a 99-year ground lease. So basically have a very long-term lease for their home on that lot. They technically don't own it, but for legal purposes and the purposes of titling and financing the unit, they can treat that unit as real estate and get access to a very high quality government-backed USDA home loan. Obviously, that's only accessible in states where USDA RD has started that pilot program and in areas where rural development is active. So you have to be in a rural area for that to happen. So this would not be possible in a place like Fairfax, obviously. But the moving away from the full lot rent model down the spectrum into greater home ownership via cooperative models and land trust models opens up the flexibility to write leases and title these units in ways that Virginia Housing or other lenders can come in with better high quality loan products that are pretty much just a standard home loan that allow the residents to build equity. And of course, the other part of that is to make sure that the home that they're purchasing is high quality enough and strong enough and durable enough that it'll actually appreciate over time. So you can begin to see how all these different topics have to weave together to make it all come together right.
Okay, great. Before I open it up to questions, Jonathan, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned to me that the coalition is forming these SWAT teams of technical experts to come and advise local governments. Could you say a word about that? Because we don't want to go too far into the weeds in a public forum, but there sure are plenty of weeds in this area. So tell me what your plans are to do that around the
Sure.
state.
Well, yeah, one of the needs that we identified in our symposium was to understand how to intervene when parks are being put up for sale in places throughout Virginia. There's a new state law that just took effect this July that requires park owners, before they sell a park, to notify the State Department of Housing and Community Development, which then will post a notice of sale on their DHCD state agency website. And so I'll share that link in the chat in just a second. But basically what we want to do is start some sort of quick response process by which experts and advocates can figure out, okay, we know of a park that is coming up for sale or that is for sale in a particular community. How can we deploy expertise and resources to understand what is the condition of the park, how organized are the residents, are there nonprofit actors or partners in that locality, in that community, that have been doing work in this park or are interested in maybe acquiring this park, and how can we formalize this process in a way that we are no longer caught off guard when a park comes up for sale. My ideal world is a place where our coalition and partners throughout the state are much more aware of what's happening on the ground, and so we can be proactive and not just reactive. because it takes a lot of stars to align to save and preserve a park when one comes up for sale. And so we've just had one very brief meeting of some folks from across the state, some representatives from Virginia Housing and some other nonprofit groups that are interested in this space. And so I'm hoping that work will continue to, expand in 2021, and that within the next 12 to 18 months, our coalition will be the clearinghouse for, understanding the park transfers and being able to respond very rapidly and proactively when there is a park that comes up for sale.
Okay, that's great. All right, let me open it up to questions. I think Larissa and Matt have the questions before them. Or if you want to have people raise hands or however you want to do it, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
We have quite a few questions and some are statements. So Larissa, I don't see you here in the box. Are you still here, Larissa? Do you want to ask those, or would you like me to turn it over to people?
I am here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Yep,
Yeah.
I see you now.
Sorry. No, I think it's fine if people want to, if people want to go ahead and ask some questions. There's a lot of conversation in here and questions about kind of doing the legal ownership of mobile home residents of the land and being able to form that kind of a coalition. And we've talked quite a bit about that, but if there are remaining questions that folks want to ask, particularly with you, Leah, if there's anyone there that has any questions, I think we'd be happy to take them. Here's a question that asks the panelists if you have any examples of mobile home park acquisition preservation strategies in high cost areas like Northern Virginia, and perhaps with less than willing owners who want to earn top dollar. I mean, that really gets to the heart, I think, of the situation that we're facing here.
Well, I tell you what we found in California, and there's no higher price market than California right now, except maybe downtown DC or downtown New York and Boston. But we're finding when they get notice, advance notice, and hopefully that'll happen, Jonathan, that'd be great. People come in, nonprofits and residents go in, and we found them either doing nonprofit purchase of the community, and then the nonprofit will operate that community. Municipalities will sometimes buy the community from the developer. And again, one of those roadblocks, one of the hurdles I mentioned earlier is return on initial investment. And sometimes when an owner investor has that property, they're looking at maximizing that return. So if it's truly a dollar and cents issue with the owner, then you can be ready for a pretty long and frustrating battle. If there is a social mission side to the owner, then you have hope, and that's the best scenario, where you may be able to either take it into a community land trust, a co-op, a resident community, or nonprofit ownership of the community, and for that protection and actually restoration. So
I'll add just, I think one tool at the state level, which has now been opened up, is the notice of sale provision, but also a right to purchase law, which other states have very robust examples of, which require park owners, when they go to sell, to entertain fair market offers from a resident organization or a nonprofit that has the written, representation of at least a certain percentage of the residents, to basically open up a window where only nonprofit or resident offers can be entertained by the current park owner. I had to go back and look at the code and see what passed in this most recent legislation. I think that window was very slim and narrow, and so there are opportunities in state law to expand that, or at the very least to provide localities with the authority to create those provisions on their own. So I think that is probably the best mechanism. I was looking at the map of the ROC communities across the country, and many of them are in not high dollar areas, but there are some in Portland and in Massachusetts. And so I think it is possible, but it requires a little bit of public policy twisting to make it happen. It's very hard to interfere in that private market exchange.
What kinds of different forms of ownership have you seen in communities that have been successful in doing this in terms of forming a coalition? Is it normally in sort of a standard like an LLC or a corporation, or how have you seen that ownership work?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it depends on the situation. I'd have to go back and look and see what the resident-owned community model generally uses. I think it's a limited equity cooperative legal entity of some kind. It probably depends on state law and best practices around cooperative ownership. But I think there is some flexibility to it. And that's just for resident-owned models. Obviously, if you have a community land trust or a nonprofit ownership, it's generally going to be a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization, which may or may not have resident representation on its board of directors. So I think there's a spectrum of different, legal entities that may be created to satisfy that need, depending on local and state circumstances and what might be best just to finance and preserve that park.
I'd love to pick on some of our elected representatives as well as their staffers, and I'd love to start with Delegate Krizek. Paul, what are some of your thoughts as you've been hearing the presentations tonight, and what do you think might be possible at a state level? And then I'll sort of pick on the Fairfax County folks a little bit to talk about what we might change at the county level.
Hey, thanks for doing this, Mary, and putting this program together, Larissa. I'm very impressed. My name is Paul Krizek, and I represent the 44th District, which includes about, I think, 5 of the mobile home parks on Richmond Highway here on the Route 1 from Alexandria through Fairfax County down towards Fort Belvoir area. It's a big concern. I mean, I agree that the most important thing we can do is to preserve these parks, these communities. I think, I forget who it was who said, I think it was Dan, that you wouldn't ask that question of a upper or a middle class community, why do you exist? But it's always asked. It's always an ROI, for these kind of communities, and everybody's looking at better density and bigger and more units that you can get in there, maybe more affordable housing units even, but there's no the value of the community itself is kind of ignored, and I know these are, I've walked around these communities, met the people, and it's nice. They have their own, their own house with their own yard, albeit maybe it's a small yard, but they have neighbors, they have areas to play in and engage with each other. So whatever we can do to save them is important. And one of the interesting things I've learned, just kind of diving into this over the last few years, is that the newer models these newer models are really quite nice. I mean, the modular housing, I guess as they call it now, it's there's some really great stuff. I'd love to be able to, even if it takes one unit at a time to help people buy newer versions. But I think the one thing we have going for us now in the Commonwealth is there's a new sheriff in town. Last year, beginning of this year, we had our first General Assembly with a progressive Democratic General Assembly from the House to the Senate, and then you have the governor's Democrat as well. So it's really the first time we've had an opportunity to do anything legislatively that would be beneficial and helpful. And I'm open to introducing whatever bills it takes. I did put in a bill last year at Mary's insistence. It was I tried to get so that if a development is sold, that there would at least be money for people to be able to move their units. And I remember many years ago, we had a huge, maybe 500 unit home area that was right where I think not the Costco, but the Walmart that came in, and United Community Ministries at the time, now it's called United Community, took the point and worked with Fairfax County, was able to negotiate with Walmart a 12-month extension to give everybody time to get out of there. And this was about 25 years ago, and $10,000 per unit to go. And I think that's the kind of legislation we're trying to do. And we ended up at $3,500 a unit, I think, and $2,500 outside of Northern Virginia. But I'd like to get that number up. But I'm just listening and taking it all in. Whatever you guys, your ideas that you have, send them to Mary, send them to me. I want to work with Virginia Housing as well. And we also have a lot of great nonprofits. I see some of the nonprofits represented in the gallery here in the Zoom meeting. So we have the capability, and the county is very supportive. I think we want to protect these, and we want to upgrade the the units so that they're not. I mean, some of these parks are like have potholed streets. I've often said that if 60 Minutes were to come down here and do an expose of some of these parks, it would be quite an embarrassment for Fairfax County and for the Commonwealth, frankly. And I know that's coming to what it looked like in Manassas before Catholics for Housing went in there, and with the state. But we need to. We should not have, our residents should not be living like that, and with open sewers and things like and massive potholes. And it's not right, and it's not the way we want to have our community look, and we want to protect these the residents and keep them there, but we want them to live in much better conditions and not in this kind of squalor in some of these cases. So whatever I can do to help, that's what I'm here for. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Supervisor Stork? I know you missed some of it, but would love to hear sort of some of your thoughts and plans of how we can deal with this issue.
Thank you. And I did miss a lot of the presentation, but to be honest, I'm familiar with the issues pretty well, and recognize that, I think has been said oftentimes, it's going to take a lot of different resources in order to protect and preserve the community as we, I think, believe it needs to be, while still moving us forward into the 21st century. We clearly have major renovations and major development taking place in our community. And as I've committed over and over and over again, and more importantly, I think I'm helping to deliver some of that, is that we will leave no one behind. I may not look exactly the same as the quarter does today, but the folks who live here now, who want to stay here now, want to be part of this community, we need to ensure that they have that opportunity. And I'm deeply committed to that. We have a lot of new housing that's, I think, shown that commitment, but we also have some major challenges. And I think you touched on probably one of the most important ones tonight, is we have a lot of parks that need a lot of support, and the homes that are there are also pretty needy. And we need to balance that, much like Dan Rosensweig was talking about, balance that kind of redevelopment of the park with keeping the community intact. And so that truly is my commitment, is that it is about a lot of different things, and we know money is one of the core parts of that, and having a generous benefactor like they had in the Charlottesville area is probably a huge part, or I guess maybe at a minimum, having a park owner work with you and be willing to work with you to come up with a formula to keep that community intact as you upgrade and improve and address the roads, as Paul was saying, or address some of the units, is an essential part of this. But I think all in all, we're trying to raise everybody up, and that means it's going to take a lot of time and effort. And it's absolutely a county role for sure to lead that, and I view that absolutely as a key role of mine, to ensure that we leave no one behind. But it isn't going to be done without huge amounts of federal, whether it's tax credits or even federal direct money, which I would love to see, and state money. mean, the state really has to help us find a way to support the different funding sources that it takes. North Hill is a good example, had funding sources from at least 4 or 5 different places, and it took well, at least 5 or 6 years to put all those funding sources together. It's a huge lift, and we need a simpler way. We need I guess, a more effective way to do that, so it doesn't take, you know, half a decade to do that. We can do that in a simpler, more appropriate way. With the widening of the highway, with the change of Richmond Highway, that's going to drive a lot of the change for us, which is why I think Mary has done, all of us, and obviously Larissa, you guys have done all of us like a good favor, if you will, by keeping and raising the issues that we need to be talking about right now. Because while the construction of the highway is going to be another 4 or 5 years, we need to be identifying how we're going to kind of make those changes. And if we have enough lead time, we ought to be able to do more of them than we could if we try to rush it. So a lot of heavy lifting to do. That's a personal commitment I've made, as people have heard me over and over again. And we've got some great examples already along the corridor, but we have so much more to do. It's almost pales in comparison to what we've already done. And the last point I'll make, and I know John Faust is on the line, and he'll probably be speaking next, is that we have a huge need to disperse, you know, our affordable housing around the county. And I know that's part of John's commitment as well. Yeah, we have a lot of need on Richmond Highway, and I want to make sure that we don't lose, and we want to ensure we continue to provide affordable housing. But there's so many other areas of the county that have so little by comparison. And part of our commitment, part of my personal commitment to One Fairfax, is that we provide those opportunities around the county as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Stork. We appreciate that very much. Supervisor Faust? Oh, you are on mute. There you go.
I am unmuted now. Thank you very, very much for including me. Mary, thank you for the invitation. You know, I am, I think, very fortunate to have the role of chairman of the county's housing, the Board of Supervisors Housing Committee. I took over this year from Kathy Hudgens, who I think probably had a role for about 20 years or more. So I am not holding myself out as the expert that Kathy is and was and is. But you know, there's a lot that we're working on. I think it's a little bit, well, it's very coincidental that this week, 2 days ago, we had in a housing committee meeting, and I had put on the agenda a topic that we didn't have a whole lot of details on. We just wanted to hear a discussion from the board members, and that was home ownership. You know, what can we do as a county to advance the ability of all our residents to be homeowners if that's their choice? And you know, one of the underlying cause, obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, but I think it probably is, for me to want to focus on that is the focus we're placing on equity at this time, and recognizing the historical, you know, the things that have happened historically, the racial discrimination and so forth, that have caused certain groups of people to not be part of the success that others have had with home ownership as far as creating wealth. So we're looking at that, and I'm sure you know, the manufactured housing, it can be a significant part of that. But basically, we're going to look at what you know, review what all the programs that are available that could help, that we could use to help our residents become or develop equity in their homes. And I will say, you know, with pride, that the board, every member of the board, I don't think there was an exception, who spoke, was very supportive of this. I think you're going to see some creative stuff coming out of Fairfax County, and I think you're going to see the board's continuing commitment to the affordable housing issue, which has, as observers know, has risen to the very top of our priority list over the last couple of years, including commitments we've made to deliver units and to help others deliver units. So, I think it's really important, but it's also, I think it's, I just proud of the fact that not only the Board of Supervisors, but so many of you in the community care so passionately about this. It's, I mean, what can be more important than having a home that you can raise your family in and live in and so forth. And as a county, I think we're moving in the right direction. So looking forward to continuing working with all of you. I'll shut up now and let her speak.
Yeah, let Simon have a word.
So anyway, thank you so much, and especially you, Mary, for including me. And hello, Dan Stork and Paul. Thank you for speaking. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Supervisor Faust. My son is in his last burst of energy before bed.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Matt. I'm going to ask Matt to speak on behalf of Rodney as I deal with the chaos in my house.
Sure. I'll just say very quickly, Supervisor Lusk did really want to be here tonight. We had a longstanding town hall commitment, which he is honoring. So I am here on his behalf. Great discussion. Thank you so much to all of the speakers. I won't belabor the points that have already been made by our fantastic elected officials that are here on the importance of the things that have been discussed in the long-term targets. One thing I'll mention that our office is working on as a near-term target is understanding not just how to help the residents of these parks move towards home ownership, but how to serve them while they're in their current circumstance, which, as we talked about tonight, can often be exploitative. One of the issues that we run into in Lee District is when we go into these communities to try to address some of the more egregious things that just can't be ignored. When we have code compliance or other county agencies go in there, they can't ignore the other things that they see. Once they see it, it becomes a liability issue and they have to address it. And in instances where a health code violation can be on the list, folks have to move. They have to vacate the premises. And so we are looking at ways, and I think we've made some progress with the CSP and the county on finding ways to make sure that code compliance and the health department is communicating with our human services agencies to make sure it's not just a door hanger or a flyer that's handed to a family that might not speak English or might not feel comfortable reaching out to the county for resources, but there's somebody there from CSP who helps them find transitional housing, who makes sure that they have the support they need so they don't fall into a cycle of homelessness or something worse while we solve those code compliance issues. I think that it's something that's we're gonna see a lot more of on the Lee District side as we work through these, and I'm sure hopefully throughout the county as maybe we can solidify some of these policies. So that's what we're working on from our office.
I cannot unmute myself, so I will let Mary finish out. Thanks.
Hi, I just wanted, we've a little bit over time. I just wanted to say this was a great discussion. I think we found our niche at South County Task Force in the age of Zoom here, where we can get the residents and the politicians and the office holders and the people with new innovative ideas all in the same space at the same time to discuss some of these issues. I think this is just fabulous. And we've done a series of these this year and we'll try to continue with that. And if there's anything we can do to help, hey, Simon, how are you? If there's anything we can do to help people stay in communication, we're very happy to do that. So that's about it. Since we're out of time, I'll just thank everybody again. And thank you, Simon, too. And do we have anything else? No, we are recording this, so we're going to make sure that anybody who wasn't able to come is able to view it and to learn from it. And we hope to continue the discussion over the next months and years. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, panelists.